Rated X.
Welcome to the Launchpad podcast.
Motherfucker!
I'm Zach Long, and welcome to the Launchpad. Today on this Launchpad podcast, I wanted to do the 3,000 subscriber question and answer episode that I alluded to a few weeks back. Now, before I get into this, I do want to apologize ahead of time. I am recording this in an Airbnb. It's kind of a cool setup, nice little jacuzzi tub and stuff like that, nice room. But there is a highway in the not too far distance from me, so if you hear some obscure traffic sounds during this podcast, I do apologize, but I'm trying my best without my traditional setup. As I mentioned before, I gathered some of the questions you had on YouTube, on the Reddit Launchpad thread, and some of the ones on the Discord page as well. I just got about a dozen here that I'm going to run through real quick. But a big shout out once again to everybody who's liked, subscribed, and supported this podcast throughout the couple years now that I've been consistently putting videos up. I really appreciate it. I try my best to comment back if I see somebody throw a comment on a video or something like that. I'm sure some fall through the cracks, but I do that not only just to answer the question, but also to show you that I am paying attention, that I do appreciate the fact that people take time out of their day to check out my videos, whether it's the album analysis videos, whether it's some of the podcasts I do, album reviews, documentary style compilations, whatever type of content. I appreciate everybody for showing up. I appreciate all the support. I can promise you there's a lot more to come. So without any further ado, I want to get into some of these questions and give you some answers on what you threw my way. I forgot to write down what questions came from what platform, so I apologize. That was stupid of me. If I do this again in the future, I'm going to try to notate what question comes from YouTube versus Reddit, etc. So my apologies, but that will change in the future. The first question I have here is from KJ Mainstay. I'm not sure if that's like a hip-hop name or what, but it probably could be one. But KJ asks, why did you name your channel The Launchpad? Okay, well, first off, when I started this channel, the whole purpose was basically to practice doing various forms of media content. Practicing doing actual podcasts, practicing a documentary style video editing, and to practice film reviews and just a bunch of different things.
Listen, we talking about practice, not the game that I go out there and die for. We talking about practice, man. I mean, how silly is that? I'm not shoving it aside, like it don't mean anything. I know it's important. I honestly do. But we talking about practice, man. What are we talking about? Practice?
So essentially the whole purpose of this channel was to try my hand at some things I've never done before. I just felt a fitting name was the Launchpad because that kind of sums up launching or beginning into this adventure I've been chipping away at for a while. Now I will say this is way off into the future, mind you, but a day will come if this channel continues to grow where I keep the channel itself, but I do a whole rebrand of the name and the imagery associated with it. Because once again, as I mentioned, this was supposed to be kind of like a practice. And when the day comes where I feel the quality has risen enough where I can no longer just claim to be practicing, I have a whole different name, logo, and everything already waiting in the wings of what I'm going to shift this thing into. But I'm going to wait to reveal that information until it's appropriate for it to take effect. So, good question, KJ. Thank you for supporting the podcast. Next question. Cynthia Walsh asks if I have any advice for starting a YouTube channel. Well, Cynthia, I hate to tell you, but I'm kind of new at this. I can give you a few pointers of what I've done, but to be honest, I don't really feel all that qualified to answer this question quite yet. So, I'll give you a few tips that worked for me, at least up until this point, but I'm far from an established YouTube channel, so you might be more suited to get more in-depth advice elsewhere. But I'll do the best I can for you. First off, just do something you're interested in. I can tell you right now, in some ways I was lucky because a few of the subjects I picked early on got a good amount of views. However, I can tell you right now, I don't have the analytics right in front of me. I'm not logged into YouTube. I don't have my laptop handy. But if I did, I can testify that for the first year of being officially labeled as a YouTube channel. Now, mind you, I was not uploading consistently at all. I mean, to be honest, it was just every once in a while slapping something up there. However, it was something I always wanted to grow into something bigger, but when I first started, I wasn't in any sort of rush to make a push into uploading every week or every month for that matter. Since my first upload, I'm pretty sure it was like I maybe did 5 videos my first year. So I guess my first advice would be, if you start a YouTube channel, be more consistent than I was, because you will probably get a following a lot quicker. Secondly, once you do it, just do something that you personally are interested in. Don't do something you think just people are gonna like. You know, like, oh, well, I'm going to do this type of video or that type of video, or do something that you don't really give a fuck about just because you think that might get you more subscribers or watch time or likes or whatever criteria. So that would be some advice for sure. Trying to think of anything else in addition to that. Oh, yeah, I guess this was a big one for me. Interaction with your subscriber base. You know, if somebody asks a question about one of your videos, or if they're kind enough to say that they liked your video or appreciate your video or anything like that, I would do your best to respond to them. Even if it's just, hey, a quick thanks, or I appreciate it. Of course, nobody expects you to, especially starting out, to live and die by your phone and respond to every single person if you can't. Of course, we have other responsibilities in life that we can't always be right by our phones, but I think making an effort to at least let people know that you appreciate the fact that not only they watched your video, that they took time to either give you props, feedback, or any other forms of suggestions. I think that goes a long way when people see that you are paying attention, that you're not simply just uploading and evacuating, that you're actually engaged over the long haul. I think that does a great service to not only the people that check out your videos, but you yourself, because that actually builds a bond or a type of online community. It's all virtual, it's all through the internet, but it's cool to know that there are people out there that have similar interests. I know some of the content I make personally, I love my friends, I love my family, but some of this stuff I'm completely on an island in terms of what I like. So that's one of the reasons I actually made the YouTube channel. I don't have a lot of friends I can talk to about, hey, you know, I read this good Jack Kerouac book, or hey, I listened to this crazy blues record from this legendary musician Robert Johnson, who allegedly sold his soul to the devil. I don't really have people who I can talk to about that type of stuff. So that's one of the reasons I made videos on those guys. So I guess that would be a few pieces of advice I'd give you. Do what you want in terms of your personal tastes, be engaged with whoever interacts with your videos, and also, when you first start, odds are your videos are gonna barely get any views. If you look at my YouTube channel, in terms of views, some of my biggest videos literally got fucking ignored for like a year plus. And then one day I'm on YouTube and I see, for example, the Slipknot documentary style compilation that I did for Paul Gray. That is one of the biggest videos on my channel right now. And literally it was just completely ignored for a year plus. And that has happened several times. So don't do it for the views. If you're going to make a YouTube channel, whether it's a channel about entertainment or music or history or cooking or knitting or whatever the fuck you're going to do it for you. It doesn't matter who's paying attention. It doesn't matter who's watching. Don't put that type of pressure on yourself right away. Just follow things that you're interested in, that you can actually speak with semi amount of authority on, and then just have fun and be consistent as you can. Because if I was a lot more consistent in the beginning, I think I might have already had 5,000 subscribers by now. That's about as good as I can say at this moment. Down the road, I might have better advice to give, but at this point in time, that's about as good as I can do. So Cynthia, if you are starting your YouTube channel, feel free to drop a comment on one of my videos about what you decide to do it on, and I would be happy to check out your content whenever you make something. Best of luck to you. All right, next question. Now, Paul the Master asks, well, I guess I should say first, I don't have a master named Paul, so rest assured I'm not chained up in somebody's basement and have to refer to them as a master. This is somebody on YouTube, but Paul asks, why don't I appear in my videos and only do voiceover? Well, Paul, good question. Okay, there's a few tangents I'm going to go on, so strap in. Well, first, I mean, if somebody digs deep enough on my channel, you can see videos of me, or at least photographs. The first couple podcasts that I ever did with a good friend of mine, Sean, shout out to my friend Sean Hardcore. Some of the first videos on that channel were about him and I going into these heavy metal rock and roll music festivals in Columbus, Ohio, Rock on the Range, which would later be rebranded as Sonic Temple. We did recap podcasts about our thoughts on certain artists, how they performed, and also people we were looking forward to seeing that year. And in that video, I had slapped up a few photos that we took at the festival. Sean and I appeared in some of those photos. videos. So I know that's the first example that comes to mind where you actually can see what I look like. Secondly, I believe it was when I had 2,000 subscribers, I posted a photo of me in terms of celebration. That's right on YouTube under my community posts. So it's not like I'm hiding or anything, or like I'm wanted by the FBI and I'm just trying to keep a low profile. It's just that I noticed a lot of channels on YouTube, and this goes for both men and women, where they use their look to gain a following instead of the substance of their content on the channel. And that was always something that I never wanted to do. Not that I'm just so strikingly handsome that they're going to subscribe just because that reason alone. That's just kind of a pet peeve of mine. When I see men and women out there who literally are getting thousands of subscribers by just simply regurgitating information other people have already put on the internet just because they look like a Calvin Klein model or have some big tits or something. I never really wanted to get into that, but I wanted to know that whether I succeeded with this channel or failed with this channel, whether I had 5 subscribers or 5 million, that it was based on my own volition in terms of information, in terms of what I brought to the table, not just skating by on my look, whether somebody liked me because of my look or disliked me because of my look. So it's not like I'm hiding. In fact, there's some of these videos that are even coming up that I'm going to briefly appear in, whether it's video or just a quick little photo. So, I mean, I'm not like hiding out or afraid to appear in my videos. It's just, to me, it should always be information first, what you offer first. And I felt that way when I started this channel. I feel that way even more so now. So even if I do start appearing more frequently in my videos in terms of photographs or video clips, or even just being more active with community posts, I still basically am adhering to a T the principles I founded this channel on to begin with. So if you really want to see what I look like, you can dig around and find out. But once again, I never wanted it to be the main focus of the channel. So that's why I've done it this way. I'm probably going to continue to do it this way for quite a while at least. The next subscriber question comes from Jay Watchtime, which is another unique handle. So Jay Watchtime asks who my favorite Slipknot member is. Well, Jay Watchtime, that's a little complicated. Reason being is because my 2 favorites are now dead. Joey and Paul, which of course is one of the reasons why I made those documentary videos on my channel about them. So if you're saying all-time Slipknot member who I like best, it would be Paul Gray, followed just behind by Joey Jordison. But if you're saying in the current lineup, I guess I would have to go with number 8, Mr. Corey Taylor, because I think his diversity of vocal style is hard to beat for any band, not just a metal band. And I think some of his lyrics over the years have been pretty fucking good too. Personally, to me, it's just the type of fan I am. I always respect a band, singer, artist, whatever, in terms of like writing and filmmaking or music even, by how well something is written or executed. And I think he does a hell of a job, even though like this last record they put out was kind of iffy for me. There was some songs I liked, but a lot of them, they were kind of rough. I didn't really like them at all. So despite that last record not really being my cup of tea, shall I say, I still respect the band. I still love Slipknot. There's more Slipknot videos coming on my YouTube channel, I will tell you that. But in terms of favorite, Paul Gray, Joey, and then I'd have to say Corey. Next question, let's see. Rob Fox asks, excuse me, his YouTube is Rob Fox Official. If I'm remembering correctly, I think he does music or something on his YouTube channel. So if you hear this, check him out. But anyway, Rob asks, would I be open to doing an analysis video for 9 Inch Nails or How to Destroy Angels, which, if you don't know, is Trent Reznor's musical side project with his wife, Mara Queen, and his longtime collaborator, Atticus Ross? Well, Rob, to answer your question, yes, I absolutely would. In fact, one of the next analysis videos coming out is for 9 Inch Nails, The Downward Spiral. And there might be one either right before or right after. I can't say if it's going to be a full analysis, but there's going to be something for 9 Inch Nails' Broken record as well. So there's going to be a couple 9 Inch Nails like analysis or reaction review type videos coming out in the spring. So yeah, definitely open to it and definitely going to happen. Now, in terms of How to Destroy Angels, I actually like that band quite a bit. They're not my favorite band or anything, but as far as side projects go, I found them pretty interesting and I do listen to them on occasion. But I guess something I should announce, one of the things in terms of the analysis that I did for the Manson records, the reason I did them that way is because they are concept records, where there's actually a built-in storyline that you connect threads on. Now, there's other references through society or personal connections to the artists themselves and such, But one of the reasons those analyses are what they are is because they're based on concept records. So for example, a big question I get oftentimes is, are you going to do more Manson records? And yeah, I will, but you must know that those analysis videos are going to be different, slightly different at least, because they're not concept records. There's not some big story weaving in each track and they all connect together like chapters in a book. That doesn't happen. I did those 3 records, they're done, and he's never really done a concept record since. Now Trent did concept records for The Downward Spiral, The Fragile, and that's it. His other records are just songs recorded at the same time. So am I going to do analysis videos for those? Yes, but just a fair warning, they're going to be slightly different. It's almost going to be like a fine-tooth comb review, where not only do I make comments about what I like about the music and stuff like that, but I'm going to dig into, if there's threads I'm aware of in terms of what it meant to the artist, or what they might be talking about in the lyrics, or the reason certain sound the way they do. If I have any background knowledge about those facets of the album, that's what I'm going to be digging into, because there are no real stories left for the Manson records or some of these other artists. I'll also give you another one that just recently came in as a paid suggestion from a subscriber. Is they want a analysis video of David Bowie's Ziggy Stardust record. So that's going to be coming this year in 2023. I'm real excited about that. And once again, that's a concept record. So that is going to be like a full traditional type analysis. Also, Pink Floyd Dark Side of the Moon was also a subscriber paid pick. With those type of videos, it takes a while to make. So just because you heard it here first, some of those may not drop for another 6 months or more. But I know the next ones coming up are The Downward Spiral and I believe Ziggy Stardust. I always put them in order based on how long they've been waiting, because when somebody's kind enough not only to like the channel, subscribe to my videos, but also send like paid requests, I try to communicate with them and say, hey, I have work, personal life responsibilities, so I get around to them as quick as possible. But at the same time, I don't want to just rush them, because I want to make it worth the wait. So if it's waiting 3 months or 6 months, I just convey to them, I'm going to make it as swift as possible, but at the same time, I'm going to take my time because I want to do them justice. That's a long-winded way of saying yes to 9 Inch Nails, and in terms of how to destroy angels, there's going to be down the road, probably quite a ways down the road, some sort of video for them, whether it's review, whether it's analysis. We'll see what I can come up with, but I will be touching on those also. Okay, Beats for Weeks asks if I have any book recommendations. Depending on what you like, yeah, I guess so. What I'm reading right now is Rob Zombie's book, The Lords of Salem. I know it was made into a film 10 years ago or something like that at this point, and I dug the movie. It was really weird. The first time I watched the film, it was one of those ones where there was things I liked about it, things I wasn't really sure of, so I had mixed feelings, but that's one of those movies where every time I watch it, it seems to get a little better. So I like the movie. I just found out not too long ago that there was a book, and a friend of mine, by the kindness of her soul, picked it up for me. So I'm actually reading that one right now. I'm about halfway done. It's pretty good. It touches on a lot of familiar elements that the movie captured, but it really fleshes a lot of things out. So if you're out there listening and you are a fan of Rob Zombie's The Lords of Salem film, and you want to maybe kick it up a notch in terms of fleshing that out more, the book is a tremendous way to do so. Outside of that one, let's see. As some of you may know by looking at the video history on my channel, it's no secret that I love Hunter S. Thompson. He's one of my favorite authors of all time. His book, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, is fucking incredible. The movie's tremendous also. So that's a good one, but if you never saw the movie or read the book, it's kind of a wild thing to jump right into. Like early 70s psychedelic chase for the American dream type of attitude. So, it's pretty cool. Other books I like by Hunter Thompson, his book about the Hells Angels biker gang is pretty good, but it's more like a journalist account because, truly Hunter did write a few books, but he was much more of a journalist than a novelist. So that kind of falls in line with him just following around the biker gang and actually giving his account after living with them, partying with them, and everything back in that era of what they were like. And of course, in traditional Hunter S. Thompson fashion, some of it is outlandish fabrication just for comedic purposes, but it's still, in all the humor and sarcasm at its core, at its heart, it does capture the truth. So you have to kind of be a smart, read between the lines type of person when you read Hunter to really decipher between the pure comedy and actuality. So those are two picks. Other than that, another artist I love tremendously is Jack Kerouac. I have one video on my YouTube channel about him so far, and there's probably going to be another one coming down the line at some point. But his book On the Road is an absolute tremendous book, and it's essentially autobiographical. He went on this trip in the 1940s with some of his famous poet friends and things like that, and they were basically hitchhiking across the United States with little to no money right after World War II. And in a weird way, it's kind of related to Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, because those guys like Jack Kerouac and his friends were basically trying to find meaning. They felt like outcasts. They felt like they just did not fit in the world at that point in time. So they were traveling not only to America, but other countries, just desperately trying to find a reason to belong. So I like that one a lot. His other books are tremendous too, but he has very peculiar writing style. I mean, he actually inspired Hunter S. Thompson, and he reinvented the way many people write novels. He was honestly like the first rock star, big celebrity writer in America. So I'm not sure how many people are aware of that, but his whole life story is fascinating. I mean, there's a bunch of movies made about him and things like that, which I definitely recommend, but he's a fascinating character, and it takes way too long to really get into his whole life story on this episode of my podcast. But essentially, he wrote for years, literally over a decade, wrote well over half a dozen novels, and nobody wanted a single thing to do with him. They didn't like it, they did not understand it, and then one day, literally years later, all these books he's wrote from his early 20s to early 30s, he's in his mid to late 30s, and finally he gets recognition. And they did not pay him well. He basically got screwed over on his publishing deal. He did not make jack shit in terms of the money he deserved, but the only thing he got out of it was fame. And sadly, in his day, some of the concepts he was writing about were not welcomed. A lot of the concepts he was celebrating and encouraging actually led to the 1960s hippie movement. And when that started taking off, he received a lot of blame and backlash. So much so, he was publicly beaten and assaulted when he would go to certain bars and restaurants and stuff. He took a lot of shit for his work, and sadly he ended up drinking himself to death before the age of 50. It's always a sad story for me because Jack Kerouac honestly is probably my favorite author, and he was a tremendous guy. I don't think this world deserved his honesty, and I'm glad there's people out there like me who appreciate his work, because he literally was destroyed because of his art, and that's very sad to think about. But it also makes you consider how important art can be, that you're willing to die for it. If there's any artists out there listening, whether you're a painter, writer, musician, filmmaker, etc., that's another piece of advice I would give you. This society may tell you you suck, that you should have never been born, you're just a complete waste, but there's time and time again a bunch of artists who stood the test of time. Yeah, maybe in their day they did not receive recognition, maybe they were looked down upon, but I believe true art always, sooner or later, finds its crevice and does make an impact. Now, off the top of my head, any other recommendations in terms of a book? Well, I definitely like Chuck Palahniuk a lot. He wrote Fight Club, which of course was a big book, but even bigger movie. However, that's not my favorite book by him. My favorite book by him is probably Invisible Monsters, and it's one that it's kind of written in a peculiar style, so it might take a couple rereadings of chapter 1 and 2 before you really catch on to the flow of how he writes that one. But I don't want to spoil it, but it's a book about this girl who's just a beautiful like supermodel, and everybody just loves her, worships the ground she walks on simply because she's strikingly gorgeous. And one day she's actually shot in the face in a drive-by shooting, and it leaves her jaw removed from her face. They can't reattach it, so essentially she's walking around like mangled, completely fucking disfigured. And the book explores how once upon a time she could do no wrong. She could act like the biggest bitch in the world, she could treat people like shit, and she would be loved just because of her physical beauty. But then it calls into question, if your beauty's only skin deep, are you really that beautiful? Because as she found out later on in the book, there was a lot of personal tribulations and difficulty that came with losing that power that she once had. On that note, I think I'm going to wrap it up in terms of the book recommendations and move on, but definitely anything by Hunter S. Thompson, Jack Kerouac, and Chuck Palahniuk would be in the absolute top of the list of what I would recommend somebody to check out. Okay, this question comes from Russell Roberts, and he asks, in my view, where would I place Apple of Sodom in the Antichrist Superstar track listing? Now, I did respond to this question already in the comments, but I just felt like it was interesting to include it here as well for anybody who may not have seen. In regards to that whole flow of the record and how it fits lyrically, musically, everything, I would say it would have to be wedged between Worm Boy and Mr. Superstar. I think lyrically it would fit. it with a whole power struggle of gaining fame, adoration, and resenting it because the people giving you that attention are people that are superficial, of people that really are only latching onto you because they're taking away. They're almost being copycats. Monkey see, monkey do. They're not genuine followers. And I think with the whole struggle that the character on that record is dealing with, that's definitely in that cycle 2 section of the record. Because if it gets into cycle 3, things are just way more progressed in terms of its lyrical content. Things just get way more nihilistic and aggressive. And Apple of Sodom has a more kind of toned down, reflective vibe. Like you're still wrestling with possibilities. I just think it's far too early to be on cycle 1 because cycle 1 is about the worm analyzing his surroundings and building up his willpower. And Apple of Sodom doesn't really fit in terms of tone to that. And as I mentioned, cycle 3 is already too far past for it to belong there either. And it never really was confirmed. I even looked online before answering this question just to see if there was any old indication of where it was supposed to fit. But the closest thing you could find to it was the demo tape where things were written by hand on like a cassette track. And there's songs on there that didn't even make the record, like a re-recorded version of Suicide Snowman, and even some of the songs that ended up being on Antichrist Superstar on the demo, they were different versions, different lyrics, kind of reworked editions of those songs. So interestingly, if you are so inclined, there is on YouTube some editions of that original cassette demo tape in full where you could listen to their original sketches of the idea of the album before it really got fleshed out and polished. And it's kind of cool to listen to. I mean, I would still take the official version any day of the week over the demo tape, but it's cool. Like if you're a big fan of that record and you never heard it, it's interesting because it's almost like Marilyn Manson and the Spooky Kids doing Antichrist Superstar. So it's kind of like a throwback to the more psychedelic garage rock type of vibe that the band had before they just took that hard nosedive into industrial metal. But that is a good question though, Russell. Jeff Douglas asks, this is kind of a funny one, what movies piss me off? Wow. Well, there's quite a few. For starters, most of the movies made right now. I'm so sick to fucking death of this Marvel superhero stuff. I mean, I'm not talking shit on Marvel in general, but I just think there's so many of those type of movies coming out right now, I just want to fucking puke. They're boring. You know what's going to happen before the movie even starts. When's the last time they really killed off a superhero? And I just kind of lost interest. It's just too predictable. And, you know, maybe if I had young kids running around where, you know, you wanted to take your kid to see a movie, okay, I might be a little more excited about Marvel. But right now, I'm just so over the complete oversaturation of Marvel and superhero movies in general. If it was up to me, if I was running shit in Hollywood, I would put a 5-year pause on any superhero movie. But sadly, I think that's the state of where we're at in terms of Hollywood because they're too afraid to make a great movie nowadays. And some of that comes down to this pseudo political correct movement where you can't say anything without people getting offended or trying to cancel you. And yeah, some people are shitbags and deserve to be canceled, but I just feel in a lot of ways people are just looking for a reason to get pissed off nowadays. So they'll bitch about anything, but so that's the first thing. And also most of the quote-unquote original movies they make, different genres, anything from action movies to horror films. Once again, it's just in a lot of ways government propaganda trying to tell you what to think, and it's just predictable, watered down, and I can't even remember the last time I was excited about going to a movie in a theater. And this is somebody who is a lifelong film historian fan. I love movies from basically every era, even old movies. I know like crazy historical knowledge about production techniques on movies in the 1970s. Like I'm a big movie buff, but I hate to say it, but our current era is probably some of the worst that maybe ever existed in terms of making new films. The whole current climate pisses me off because if I look and search my mind for some of my favorite films of all time, I think of Taxi Driver, I think of some of Quentin Tarantino's movies, I think of Gaspar Noé, like Irreversible, Enter the Void, Derek Cian France in A Place Beyond the Pines, Stanley Kubrick, 2001: A Space Odyssey, A Clockwork Orange. Pretty much most of Stanley Kubrick's movies are really good. There's a lot of tremendous films over the years. Brian De Palma, Dressed to Kill was fantastic, Blowout was fantastic, Carrie was a great movie. And just sadly, if you look at a lot of those filmmakers, if they were in today's era, you wouldn't even be allowed to make half this stuff. Like truly, they'd say, oh, this isn't politically correct, we can't make it, oh, we're gonna offend somebody. And people are forgetting this is supposed to be art. good art is supposed to be provocative. I've always liked filmmakers and movies in general that take a risk, that really make you think like, wow, I've never seen something like this, or okay, maybe I did see something like this, but this is a new spin on it. I just hate those stupid popcorn movies where it's like, you know what's gonna happen as soon as you tune in and watch it. The main character is never gonna die. You can't have a good bad guy anymore. The bad guy has to be some watered down, Happy Meal type of villain, and it's just repulsive. I hate it. And as somebody who writes screenplays and has a flair for potentially making some films in the future, I think we can learn a lot in this current climate in terms of what not to do if you're a real artist, because I don't see a lot of real art being made right now in Hollywood. It's just rinse and repeat of mediocrity. And I guess that's enough of me ranting about that. So next question. Now Ken Titus asks what my least favorite Nine Inch Nails record is and why. Well, to me that one's kind of easy. The last record called Bad Witch. It's not that I did not like that record. I thought it was fairly good, but overall I just felt like a lot of the songs did not really have a replay value. Traditionally with Nine Inch Nails songs over all of their records before, I feel like they get better every single time I listen to them. And on Bad Witch, I do feel that as well, but that record's almost been out for 5 years. Now, I say the latest record, but technically that wasn't, because he did the latest Ghosts double album in 2020, which I thought was really good with the instrumentals. But if we're talking about a more traditional Nine Inch Nails release of lyrics, vocals, etc., yeah, I definitely think Bad Witch is the worst, because even with revisiting that album different times, once again, I still appreciate it, but it is not a record that I feel has songs that resonate with me on an emotional level or a personal level as other ones that he's made. But I also am eagerly awaiting their next release. I mean, we're in 2023 now. He hasn't put out an official Nine Inch Nails material since 2020. I have not heard any news stories or anything like that that does indicate that they will make another one this year, but with any luck they will, so fingers crossed. The next question is from Tommy Pickles Jr. Okay, that has to be a reference to Rugrats. If not, if your parents literally named you Tommy Pickles Jr., I'm not trying to rag on you, bro, because I appreciate your support on the YouTube channel and everything, but, you know, they could have done a little better than that. But his question is, artists that I feel are underrated. Well, man, that's kind of a broad question, because are you talking musical artists? Are you talking filmmakers? Are you talking authors, painters? To me, art is many different things. So I'm trying to think right now how I should approach your question. I guess I'll just give you a few names of everything. In terms of authors I feel is underrated, I'll go back to Jack Kerouac. I know he had a lot of notoriety back in the 60s and 70s and such, but in terms of this era we're currently in, I don't hear enough talk about him or his contribution to writing. So I will say Jack Kerouac is a name. Other authors that I feel are underrated, I will say Joe Hill. He's had some fantastic novels, kind of in the horror type of genre. His one book called The Heart-Shaped Box is one of the best horror novels I've read. Some people may be aware of this, others may not be, but Joe Hill is actually Stephen King's son. And the whole reason he writes under the name Joe Hill is because he did not want to ride on his dad's coattails. Because of course, if he comes out Joe King, people are going to scrutinize him based on comparing him to his dad and such. So I respect him a lot for trying to make his way on his own, and he is a talented writer in his own right. So I would say Joe Hill is another author that I would recommend. Now, in terms of music, let's see. I could go real obscure, but I'm not sure if I want to do that. I'll say this. There's a new band, like brand spanking new, that I've heard of called Design Flaw, and they have some really good songs. Another band that I like a lot that is starting to get more popularity, but I've been a fan of for quite a few years, is Bad Flower. I think they're really good. I think at this point they have 2 albums out, so they're kind of like a relatively up-and-coming band, but I've seen them live at a few different events and festivals and such, and not only are they talented on the records, but they're just as good, if not better, live. So Bad Flower is definitely a musical name that I would say is underrated right now. In terms of one of my favorite genres, industrial metal, there's a band out there called Three Teeth. and I think they're fantastic. They kick a lot of ass, they're hardcore, one of the best industrial bands I've heard since Antichrist Superstar era Manson. I mean, they're fucking fantastic. So if you like industrial metal, Three Teeth is a good band to check out. Now, outside of that, let's see here. If you like more heavier, intense metal, Code Orange, and not just because they're a Pennsylvania band, which, if you don't know, I am from the state of Pennsylvania, so it's not just because I'm biased because they're a Pennsylvania band. They actually kick a lot of ass. They're a really good metal band, but they're also diverse. There's some melody weaved in some of the songs too, so they're not just like a one-trick pony. Oh, there's another one that I've just literally a couple days ago found out about. Actually, thanks to a subscriber from the YouTube channel. I actually cannot pronounce her YouTube screen name. I'm not sure what it means, how to say it, or if it's just some random mumbo jumbo she came up with. But I believe her actual name is Elin. I'm going to take a stab at that. So if I got that wrong, I'm sorry. I apologize. But she actually turned me on to a band called Catatonia, and they're pretty good. I like them a lot. I've at this point listened to two of their records. They walk that fine line of being heavy enough while having melody. So if you're not really into some crazy extreme metal, Catatonia is a good one to turn to because they have some slick metal influenced guitar riffs, but there's a lot of vocal melody. There's not a whole lot of intense screaming going on or anything like that. So that is another name I'll throw out there, Catatonia. I think on that note, I'm going to wrap up the musical recommendations. Now, in terms of artists of like film, I think the filmmaker Derek Cian France is one of the best out there right now. His films Blue Valentine and The Place Beyond the Pines, I think, are some of the best of the last 15 or 20 years. The French filmmaker who I talked about earlier, Gaspar Noé, he's probably my favorite director alive right now, or at least one of them. And it's because his films are just so strangely unique to him. You watch one of his films and it's clear nobody else could make the movie that he made. So if you've never heard of him, some of his movies, like I said, are kind of unorthodox, shall we say. So I would recommend checking out things like Enter the Void is a good one he did. His new one, Vortex, is kind of atypical from his traditional style. It's a lot more like of a drama than a psychedelic emotional thriller like he usually does with some of his films. His film Love, now I must say, disclaimer, it's not for the faint of heart. There is some extreme nudity in that movie, but it's like one of the best romantic stories I've ever seen on film. It's kind of like a tragic romance, and trust me, I'm not some sappy rom-com romantic movie watcher or anything, but that is probably one of the most realistic accounts of a genuine relationship that I've ever seen on any era committed to film. So his film Love, Enter the Void, and Vortex is probably what I would recommend. If somebody wanted to check him out and see kind of what he was about, that's the three movies I'd recommend. Who else is underrated? Nicholas Refn, who did the film Drive and Only God Forgives, is very underrated. His film Neon Demon is actually criminally underrated, so check him out. He also did a cool film with Tom Hardy called Bronson, which is absolute kick-ass. Speaking of, that leads me to another filmmaker who's underrated, John Hillcoat. His film Lawless with Shia LaBeouf, Tom Hardy, and Jessica Chastain is still one of the best films I've seen probably in the last 15 years. And he's had some other really good films too. So John Hillcoat, check him out as well. Let's see. So I've covered books, I covered film, I covered music. In terms of just like traditional art, I don't know if I would say he's underrated, but somebody I would at least recommend is Alex Gray. He does a lot of spiritual, psychedelic type of paintings. He's fantastic. I've actually met him before. At least from what I gather, he seems to be a tremendous guy. Another artist to check out would be Francisco Goya. He's a lot more of a classical artist, but he has some real interestingly dark and kind of nefarious paintings that I enjoy. Predominantly the one called Sabbath of the Witches, which has kind of like a cool occult undertone to it, and I appreciate that one a lot. Another one I actually have of his in my house is The Sleep of Reason Produces Monsters. Outside of that, Egon Schiele is a tremendous painter, somebody else that I have actually been inspired by, and I find his art very awkward but interesting. It's like a car crash you can't look away from. So Google some images of his paintings and you'll see exactly what I mean. And I guess the last name I'm going to give on this is Gottfried Hellewein. He's I believe a German or Austrian artist, painter, photographer, and he does some really out-of-the-box art that is sometimes provocative and trying to get an extreme reaction out of you, but other times things are really well thought out, but never boring. Some artists try to get a little too artsy-fartsy and kind of do something that's either too simple and dull or just far too out there where it just doesn't make sense. And I think Gottfried Hellenwein walks that fine line very, very well. Okay, and the final question for this Q&A podcast session is from Michael's Garden, and he asks if I believe in God. Well, that's a very complicated question. Yeah, that might almost need to be its own podcast if I were to really do a fine-tooth comb approach to this question. But I'm just going to give a broad stroke answer for the time being. So, Michael, I do believe in, a creative force, or perhaps creative forces that provide order in our universe. So if you want to call that God, fine. But it's always weird, at least for me personally, to use the term God, because a lot of people, as soon as you say the word God, you think of, this white old man with a nasty, unkept beard in the sky, raining down blessings or curses depending on if you're one of his chosen flock. So if we're talking about that image of God, I can say I do not believe in that. But if we're saying just in terms of what I believe, well, as always, beliefs and thoughts and philosophy can change throughout your life, and I believe they should change as you grow, provided at least that you grow as a human being and learn more each year that goes by in your life. So if you ask me this question in 5 years, I might have a completely different answer for you. But what I believe is there is some sort of order in the universe, whether that's a collection of forces working together or a singular force that's orchestrating this whole thing. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I'm smart enough to answer with any credible volition on that topic. But in terms of religion and spirituality, I don't have a single solitary practice. I'm not some Catholic or atheist for that matter, or Buddhist or whatever. In fact, in a lot of ways, I kind of study different religions, not only from a historical point of view, but more of an academic point of view, where I find them fascinating and interesting, and I am always curious to get a grip and understanding on what people believe. But I guess in terms of a personal practice, the closest thing I could claim to one right now is, I guess in a weird way, almost making my own. Not that I'm starting a cult or any Jim Jones type shit, but for example, Christianity. I think there are a lot of valuable things in the Bible, and I choose to take what I like about it and apply those to my life and discard what I don't like. There's a lot of Wiccan principles that I like, and there's a lot that I don't like. And that goes on with things like Taoism, Buddhism, Hinduism. There's a lot of traditions, Satanism, that I can see value in. I can see why people would think those things. But I think as a person like I am, where I'm not a type of person that's controlled by dogma or stigma or really give a fuck in terms of trying to convert people or make people think my way or try to have people come on my side of belief. I've never really had that type of conviction where I felt like I needed a tribe of people to back me up, with my philosophies or beliefs. So I know that's kind of a scattered answer, so I guess you could say I do believe in something greater than us, but I just don't limit myself to one particular belief system, if that makes sense. On that note, I'm going to wrap up this episode. Once again, I want to thank everybody who has been along for the ride in terms of the first 3,000 subscribers. I also just want to say that anytime you comment, like, subscribe, commission a video, whatever, I do my best to pay attention. I know there's a lot of response, so please forgive me if I can't consistently get back to everybody on every comment. But the fact that I've made just acquaintances in stray conversations with people, not even just in my city, not even just in my state, not even just in my country. I have people hitting me up saying they appreciate the content from New Zealand, Brazil, England, Croatia, Russia, Canada. It just absolutely boggles my mind that this little project of mine, literally something I made to practice and just express certain things I had interest in, has already, with little promotion, garnered this much attention. Because I know some of you have heard me talk about this in the past, but I don't really do a whole lot of social media. I have a couple things, but I don't really dedicate a whole lot of time to it. I truly and honestly have never once went to Twitter and posted any of my my videos in terms of self-promotion. I never once went to social media begging for likes or please subscribe or any of that type of shit. The most I do is I upload a video, and in the video description I'll say, be sure to like and subscribe if you want to see content in the future. That's it. But it's always attached to what I've actually made. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm proud as hell that this many of you, especially this varied amount of you in terms of your individual locations, have come along for the ride. I try to keep it as true and honest as possible with the type of content and the reason why I do this. I try to maintain the utmost integrity that I can from not only what I expect from myself, but also from whatever the future of this channel and content will be. Outside of that, I'm just going to end on one final note, letting you know that the Launchpad type of content is also going to start branching out to other video media platforms. I'm going to be starting uploading this on Odyssey. I just begun uploading on Rumble. So if for any reason, if you're on YouTube, but you're unhappy with them or have, like me, run into some problems with them trying to censor or control content that you're making or that you're listening to, I just want to let you know there are other options coming down the way, and I'm going to build out the channel through some other avenues just to get a little more diversity and variety. Because like they tell you, don't put all your eggs in one basket. So I'm going to try to do that, so that way if one day I get a little too controversial for YouTube and they decide to try to pull my channel, I have other options and I'm not completely fucked. On that note, I'm going to sign off. Once again, thank you all for listening. Thank you for your support. And until next time, stay open-minded and self-realized.